I am a woman, now 23 years old. This happened 2 years ago when I was 21. I had a new baby girl who was only 4 months old. I am tall, a little over 5 feet and 9 inches, and a bit overweight. I have always had a lot of anxiety around people I do not know. One evening, I went with my older sister Clara to her job. She was 26 and very petite. She worked as a waitress at a popular diner located inside a very large and busy bus terminal. We had spent the whole day in the city raising money for a local dog shelter, and I was exhausted. I planned to just sit in a booth, eat some free food, and scroll through my phone while I waited for her shift to end. After about an hour, I decided I wanted to use my vape. I packed up my daughter's things, put her securely in her carrier, and told Clara I was stepping outside to the passenger pickup area for a few minutes. The designated spot was only about 70 meters from the diner entrance. The area was very well lit, and since it was late, it was mostly empty. I found a bench near the glass doors to sit. This is when things became frightening. A security guard was making his rounds. He was a man from India, about my height, and he walked over to me. I thought he was just checking to make sure everything was okay. He asked what I was doing, and I told him I was just waiting for my sister to finish her shift at the diner. He looked at my baby and told me she was very cute. He said he had 4 of his own children at home. Then he asked if I had a husband. I was completely single, but his questions were making me nervous. I lied and told him I had a fiancé. He smiled and said he could be my husband. He would look after the baby and me. I told him no thank you and said his wife probably would not like that. He insisted he had no wife. He said his wife would love the baby and she would love me too. He told me I should come home with him. I had finished with my vape and knew I needed to leave immediately. I stood up and started walking back toward the terminal. He followed me. I walked quickly through the mostly empty terminal, hoping I could lose him inside a large bookstore that was still open. I did lose sight of him for a few seconds, but the store was closing its gates for the night. The only place left to go was back to the diner where my sister worked. I did not want him to know where I was, but I had no choice. As I approached the diner, I saw him coming up from the lower level on an elevator. He was still watching me. I took the last few steps to the hostess stand. The owner's daughter was working there, and I quickly told her what was happening. At that moment, the security guard was standing right outside the diner entrance, just staring at me. The hostess brought me to a booth in the back, away from the windows. She went to get her father, the owner. While she was gone, the guard came into the diner. He looked around until he found me. Then he sat down in my booth, far too close to me and my daughter. He asked how old I was. He called me a pretty woman and said he wanted to radish me. He said I would be the mother to his babies. It was very clear that I was extremely uncomfortable, but he continued. He told me not to worry because he was security. He would protect me and the baby. He started to reach a hand across the table. I froze. I was not worried about the hand near me, but I watched his other one very closely. I would not let him touch my child. I was about to scream at him when the restaurant owner appeared at our table. The owner asked if there was a problem. The guard, whose English was not perfect, tried to act casual. He said there was no problem. He was just talking to his lovely lady. The owner stated that I was a customer and asked if I had done something wrong. The guard said no, never, that I was his lady and we were going to get married. He then gave me a horrible grin, as if warning me to agree with him. I felt safer with the owner there. I said that I did not know this man and I wanted him to leave me alone. The owner told the guard to leave immediately. The guard insisted I was just joking and that I loved him. He said he would be waiting for me. He finally left after the owner threatened to call the police. The owner made sure I was okay and moved me to the employee break room. He told my sister what had happened. 2 hours later, Clara's shift was over. We packed our things and went to our car in the parking garage. The security guard appeared from behind a concrete pillar. He had been waiting for me. He said he would take the pretty lady and the baby home now. Just as he said we should go, the restaurant owner stepped out from his own car, which was parked right behind us. He had been waiting to make sure we got to our car safely. He told the guard that I was going home with my sister and that he needed to leave. The guard refused and said I was his. The owner looked at us and told us to get in the car and lock the doors. He said he would handle it. We quickly got in the car and drove away. The next day, Clara told me what her boss did. When I was getting into the car, the guard had tried to grab my arm. Her boss had physically restrained him. He then reported the man to the terminal authority. The guard was fired and given a permanent ban from the entire property. It was one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me. I hope I never see that man again. This took place a long time ago, when I was in my early 20s. I went to a department store called Dalton's with my friend, Maria. She needed to exchange a package of toddler t-shirts for her young daughter. Both of us had our sons with us. They were both toddlers, sitting in a double stroller facing each other. After we were in the store for a few minutes, our sons started fighting over one of the packages of shirts. They were pulling it back and forth. I grabbed the package from them to stop the argument and tossed it into the storage basket under the stroller. Maria did some more shopping, while the boys continued to whine and poke at each other. She went to the customer service desk to exchange the shirts, and then she purchased the other items she had picked out. Afterwards, we left the store and went to a small cafe in the shopping mall for lunch. We let the boys run around in a little play area for a while, and then we sat down to have some coffee before heading home. As we were drinking our coffee, a loss prevention officer approached me. He asked me what I had stolen from the store. I was completely shocked. I told him I had not stolen anything. He said he had me on camera stealing something, and if I confessed, he would go easy on me. I told him he was mistaken and that he could look in my purse. I had nothing. He then reached down and pulled the package of t-shirts from the basket under the stroller. My friend Maria let out a small gasp. I guess she had not realized I put the shirts there, so she had grabbed another identical package off the shelf to make her exchange. I had not been paying attention because she was also buying other things, and I was busy trying to keep our sons from injuring each other. Toddlers can be a real handful. I told the officer it was a complete accident. I explained how the boys were fighting over the package, and I had just thrown it underneath to end their game. He started a long rant about how he had heard every excuse imaginable. He said I was only making things worse for myself. I tried to reason with him. I asked him if I had really intended to steal. Why would I have stayed in the mall for lunch? Why would I let the kids play and then sit down calmly for coffee? My friend Maria also spoke up. She confirmed she had an infant daughter the shirts were for, and yes, the boys had been misbehaving during our shopping trip. This seemed to make the officer angry. He went into a rage. He grabbed me by my arm and pulled me out of the cafe. He dragged me all the way back to Dalton's and into a small security room in the back. Once we were inside, I told him to watch the security footage again. I was sure he would see the babies fussing and understand it was just a misunderstanding. He left me alone in the room for 45 minutes. I assumed he had watched the video and realized his mistake. But no, he came back into the room and called me a liar. He said the video clearly showed me shoplifting and he was going to call the police. I was extremely frustrated, but I agreed that he should call the police. I figured they would watch the tape and see it was an honest mistake. He did not like that idea either. He told me that once the police got involved, he was required by law to call Child Protective Services. He said they would immediately open a case and would probably take my son into custody until I had a court date. You have to remember, I was only 23 years old and I had never been in trouble in my life. So, I stupidly believed his lies. I broke down and started crying. I told him again that I was being honest and I was not a thief. I had a clean record. I asked why I would steal clothing for a child that was not even mine. He was completely cold. He told me that the most innocent-looking people are often the biggest thieves. He said he had heard every lie you could think of. He gave me 30 minutes to confess before he called the police and had my son taken from me. I still insisted I was innocent because I was. I started begging to speak to a manager. The officer left and came back about 10 minutes later. He did not bring a manager. He brought a piece of paper. It was a generic confession form. It stated that I admitted to shoplifting an item valued at $6.99. It also said I agreed to pay a restocking fee and a loss prevention fee, and that I was banned from the store for 3 years. I was crying hysterically. I pleaded with him that I had done nothing wrong. The only thing I did was show poor judgment by not telling my friend that the shirts were in the basket. He told me he had no sympathy for thieves and liars. He said he had already called the police, and they were on their way to arrest me and take my son. He said the only way to stop it was to sign the paper. I panicked. I quickly signed the form. He then let me go. I found my friend and told her to get us out of that mall as fast as possible. Later, after telling the story to other people, I found out that what he did was completely illegal. The security guard had lied and manipulated me. He should have lost his job for his behavior. But he had gotten so deep inside my head that I just could not bear to revisit the situation, not even for a second. It has been more than a decade since that day. I still get anxiety when I think about it. I have not seen that man since, and I truly hope I never do. About 4 years ago, I worked in the laundry facility of a large hotel. My shift was overnight, from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. I often worked completely alone. We were supposed to have a security guard posted in the employee parking lot during the late hours, and they would patrol the building periodically. There was a new guard who had recently started. I noticed that I never saw him watching the parking lot when I arrived for my shift. During my shift, he would come into the laundry room. He was very talkative. I noticed he would look at my body a lot when he thought I was not paying attention. One night, I came into work and was putting my things away and getting ready to start my tasks. I had not turned on the main lights yet, so parts of the large room were still dark. Suddenly, I heard the static from a radio in a dark corner of the room. I saw the small red light of the radio. I turned on all the lights, and the new guard was standing in the corner. He had been hiding and watching me. When I asked him what he was doing, he just laughed and said he was hanging out. It was very obvious he had been waiting for me in the dark. He started doing this so often that I almost got used to it. One night, I came in a little early because I had to leave early the next morning. I was working in one of the smaller linen storage closets. He came into the small room to talk to me. He was a very large man, and I was not able to get around him. He was completely blocking the only doorway. He was just talking, but I could not move or leave the room. He asked me why I had come in early. I told him it was because I had an appointment the next day. He then told me that I was required to inform him of all my hours. He said he needed to know where I was at all times. He was leaning over me, and I felt like he was trying to intimidate me. I had a horrible feeling in my stomach that he was about to do something. I pushed past him and immediately called my supervisor. My supervisor said he would keep an eye on the guard. I told him I had a very bad gut feeling about this man, and that I was going home for the rest of the night. The very next day, the guard was fired. It turned out he was not in the guard tower at the start of the shift because he was doing something else. He would spend the first hour of his shift hiding in the woods near the employee parking area. He was recording female employees on his phone as they walked in for their shifts each morning. They had also found a huge collection of empty water bottles and food wrappers inside his locker. Apparently, he had been digging them out of the trash bins in the break rooms where I and the other women worked. It was extremely creepy. The last thing I heard was that shortly after he was fired, his wife left him and took their newborn baby. This happened a few months ago. I did not realize how strange it was until I told my boyfriend about it. At my university, our student identification cards are essential. You need them to get into all the academic buildings, the library, and to use your meal plan for food. I had dropped mine and the plastic had cracked, so the chip inside stopped working. I had to get a new one. I went to the main security office in the library and told the guard at the desk that my card was broken and I needed a new one made. He said it was no problem and that I should come with him while he printed a new one. He was an older man. I would guess he was around 65 years old, but he was in very good shape. He was tall, over 6 feet, and you could tell he had been handsome when he was younger. He had curly gray hair that was very well kept and bright blue eyes. We went into a back office behind the main security desk. It was a room set back a little ways, but there was still a good amount of foot traffic in the hallway outside. I walked in and sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs across from his desk. When we went inside, he closed the door. He sat at the computer and asked me for all my information, my student number, my name, my birthday. When he pulled up my account on the screen, he saw the picture that was used for my identification card. He asked me if I wanted to take a new picture for the new card. I said no, that the old one was fine. I really do not like having my picture taken, and I also looked like a mess that day. I was not expecting to need a new photo. He then said that my picture was pretty good and that I looked pretty. He said most student photos are very bad. I laughed and said thank you. I told him I was a senior in high school when that picture was taken at my freshman orientation, almost 3 years ago. He replied that I must have always been very pretty. I started to feel a little strange, but he was just a security officer at my school. The university is well known for having excellent security. He then said the computer was not letting him print a card without taking a new picture because the old one was from more than 2 years ago. He told me the policy requires a new picture after 2 years because people's looks can change. I found this very weird. He had just asked me if I wanted to take a new one, but now he was telling me I had to. But whatever, he was the security officer, and I needed my card. I said okay. He said he would set everything up. He went into a small closet inside the office and got out a handheld digital camera. He told me to stand up against the plain white wall. I did, and I tried to smile in a way that did not look too awkward. He told me that I needed to take my hair out of my ponytail because hair had to be down for the picture. I did not think much of this either. I could not remember ever seeing a girl's ID with her hair up. He took a picture and then said my eyes were closed. I laughed because my eyes are almost always closed in pictures. He said it was fine and he did not mind taking a few more. He then came over to me. He told me my hair looked a little messy and he was just going to fix it for me so I would look better for the picture. He started to touch my hair. I pulled my head back and said it was good enough. I told him I did not really care what it looked like because no one ever looks at it anyway. He rolled his eyes at me and said it was my picture, but it would look a lot better if he fixed it. I told him again that it was fine and not to worry about it. I was just trying to be polite. After the next picture, I saw the clock on the wall. I realized I only had 10 minutes before my next class started. I told him to just use whichever picture he had where my eyes were not closed. I said I had to go. He replied that my professor would not get mad if I was late because I was getting a new identification card from security. At this point, I had been in the office for over 20 minutes. I was not nervous, but I was getting very tired of being there, and I just wanted to leave. He told me the pictures take a few minutes to load to the printer, and I should just wait in the chair. He then started asking me personal questions. He asked what my major was, and if I had a boyfriend. He asked how long we had been dating. He also said something like, guys in college are no good. They will just waste your time. You should just break up with him and find someone older and more mature. I did not really respond to that. I just said, okay, well, I am going to go because I really cannot be late for class. I asked if I could just pick the card up at the front desk after my class. The security guard huffed and said what a rush I was in. He told me to hold on. It should be ready now. He went from his desk to the printer in the back of the room and finally grabbed my new card. He looked at it and said the picture was even better. He told me he was a pretty good photographer. Then he did a very creepy wink. He kept holding the card and not giving it to me. I was getting really annoyed at this point, but I am very bad at being assertive. I said I was sorry, but I really had to go. He laughed at me and said, okay. He said he would think a senior would not be so nervous about being a little late. He finally handed me the card. I basically snatched it from his hand. He then said he would walk me out because I was not supposed to be back there without a security guard. I was thinking, oh my God, just let me go. He walked me out of the office. I said thank you and basically ran out of the library. I thought he was weird and flirty, but I had never gotten a new card made before. I just assumed that was how the process worked. I never said anything to anyone. With about 3 weeks left in the semester, I somehow managed to lose my card again. I had been borrowing my boyfriend's card because I was super busy. I did not think I had a half hour to spare to go get another one. Finally, my boyfriend got annoyed with me using his card and told me I really needed to go get a new one. He said it only takes 5 minutes. I told him it took a half an hour and I did not have time. He asked me what I was talking about. I told him the whole story about the security guard. My boyfriend said that what happened was not okay and I needed to report it immediately. I told him I did not care enough to go through all of that, but I asked him to come with me to get a new card. When I went this time, there was a different security guard on duty. He said, "Yeah, no problem. Just wait right here. I will be back in a minute." Not even 5 minutes later, he came back with a new card. I told him what had happened the last time with the other guard. He looked very concerned. He asked me who the guard was. I did not know his name, but I described him. He gave me the name and office number of the head of security and told me he would call ahead to let them know I was coming. So I went and spoke to the head security officer. He told me that what happened was not at all protocol. When he looked in the system, he saw that the other guard had taken over 30 pictures of me. He reported it to the university administration. I had to go in and speak to a group of 3 administrators. They let me know that the guard was fired and would not be allowed on campus ever again. They also told me to notify them if I ever saw him. I know it does not sound as crazy as most stories. I did not really feel like I was in any danger at the time. But honestly, I think I was just too naive. I have always trusted security guards. I have no idea what his intentions were. Why did he take over 30 pictures of me? I just do not know, and I do not want to know. The building where I used to work had 2 security guards. There was a harmless old man who worked during the day, and a younger man my age who worked the evening shift. The younger one was not so harmless. Over time, he became very friendly with me. He asked me out on a date, and I said yes. I had already told him that I was moving out of the country very soon, so it was obvious nothing serious would come of it. But I figured if he wanted to buy me dinner, why not? The first mistake I made was giving him my home address so he could pick me up. I thought since he was a security guard at my work and I was leaving the country soon, it was a small risk. I told my office mates that I had agreed to dinner with him. I mean, what was the worst that could happen? He arrived at my apartment right on time. He was holding a large framed photograph of a sunset that he had taken himself. He told me he had bought a brand new shirt and had his car professionally detailed just for our date. I thought that was a bit much, but so far he seemed nice. I thanked him for the strange gift. I told him I forgot something inside and needed to run back in. I was not about to let him come inside my apartment. We got to the restaurant. It was a very fancy place. We had not even had our drink order taken yet when he told me something shocking. He said he was a 27-year-old virgin who had never even kissed anyone. He said this was his very first date, and he was super nervous. Oh crap, what was I supposed to do with that information? So yes, dinner was very awkward. I did my best to be polite and kind, but it just got weirder from there. At the end of the night, he drove me home. As I was getting out of the car, he lunged for my face. He stuck his tongue deep in and out of my mouth. It was a terrible kiss. I was not expecting it at all. But hey, he had now kissed a real live girl and had his first date. So good for him. I was not looking forward to telling him that I was not interested and was still moving away, but I did not want to ruin his night. Before I could break it to him, things got very weird. The next day, he called me several times. I did not answer. The day after that, he called even more. Not that it was any of his business, but I'd spent that Saturday and Sunday visiting my family out of town. I came home on Sunday night to a voicemail box that was completely full. The last few messages were very angry. When I got to work on Monday morning, I found a letter on my desk. The letter basically said that he knew where I lived and what kind of car I drove. It included other details that showed he had been taking notes on my daily routine. He demanded to know why I was not home all weekend. It was so creepy. This is why you are single, I thought. It is not because you are a virgin. It is because you are a creep. He got very angry and stalkery after that. I would see him around town when I was not at work. He was following me. At that point, I had enough. I gave my work my early notice and got out of there as fast as I could. I wish I could say that moving to another country was enough to stop him, but it was not. The guy actually managed to find me online. I do not use my real name for my work accounts, but he harassed my friends online until he found me. I used to feel sorry for him, but what the heck? I have no intention of ever speaking to him or seeing him again. I am not the best at writing. Something happened to me a few days ago that has been on my mind non-stop. I have had nightmares about it. I am going away for 5 months this summer to work in another country. I did the same thing last year. Since this time, it was not a last-minute decision. I planned ahead. I booked a low-budget cabin at a lakeside resort for my family so we could spend some time together before I left. I booked it for a full week, from Friday to Friday. The first few days were nice. We celebrated a local baseball team winning a big game. Monday was pretty much the same. We went to play bingo in the on-site lodge. This is where I first noticed a member of the resort's security team. They call them resort rangers. From a distance, I thought he was attractive. I like men with tattoos, and he had a full sleeve on one arm. I mentioned to my mother that he was nice, and we laughed about it. A little while later, he approached our table. He chatted with us about general things happening at the resort and about his job. He shook my hand and introduced himself as Leo. He then stood by our table on and off for the rest of the night, trying to engage in small talk. He made an excessive amount of eye contact with me. It was strange. I thought that must be why I was feeling so much anxiety around him, because otherwise he seemed normal. When we were leaving, he was on duty at the front door of the lodge. As we walked past, I said goodbye to him. He said something like, "Oh, do not go. I have 2 days off now, and I will not be able to see you." I thought that was very weird. We had just met him and had only had basic conversation. My mom thought I liked him, so she said she was going to go catch up with my dad. She left me alone with him. He looked like he was about to say something, but I was not interested in being alone with him. I just said, "I cannot believe she left me behind. See you later." Then I walked away. I could feel his eyes on me as I walked through the dark parking lot. It gave me so much anxiety. A couple of days went by and things were normal. On the day he came back on duty, which was a Wednesday, he noticed us right away. He walked over to our table, winked at me, and stood right next to me. He put his elbows on the table and tried to chat with me again. He was way too close to my face. I shrugged it off and went to go play with my nephew, who was at a small bowling machine in the arcade. I remember seeing Leo in the corner of my eye. He was watching me from behind one of the arcade machines. Again, I got that feeling of bad anxiety. I went back to my parents' table. He would walk by every few minutes, looking at me each time. I could not stand the feeling in my gut. I waited until he was out of sight, made an excuse, and went back to our cabin alone. My parents came back a few hours later. They told me that he kept stopping by their table and asking about me. He asked where I was and if he needed to check up on me. He also gave my mother a piece of paper with his phone number on it to give to me. I was so embarrassed. I joked with my mother about it. I mean, who tries to get someone's mom to be their wing woman? Thursday was our last day. I decided not to go out because I felt really uncomfortable after being watched. I threw his number in the trash. My parents went somewhere else, and I decided to just stay in the cabin and babysit my nephew. This is where things took a dark turn and I got really scared. He began sending me text messages on my phone. I have no idea how he got my number. I replied at first, just trying to be polite. I mentioned I was packing because we were going home the next day. He started to get a little flirty with me. I put my phone on silent and went to bed. I was in the small single room by myself. My mom had left her window and curtain wide open in the living room. My dad had fallen asleep on the couch, watching television with my nephew. I woke up a little later because I heard a rustling noise right outside my window. I froze. I could hear movement right outside. I looked through a tiny gap in my curtains. I saw him. Leo was standing there, looking around. I genuinely thought I was going to have a heart attack. I have never been so paralyzed with fear in my life. I was too terrified to make a sound. I looked at my phone. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I saw a bunch of new text notifications. I was too scared to open them, but I could read some of the previews. He told me he knew where I was. He said he wanted me to dangle myself out the window for him to play with. He sent numerous calls and texts, all while he was standing right outside my window. I just laid there for about 2 hours, too afraid to even move. I must have fallen asleep. The next thing I remember was my mom waking me up. She said she had just opened the curtains in the living room and saw him standing right outside. I would like to add that this was at 9 in the morning, almost 6 hours later. Again, I have never been so scared in my life. We were finally packed and ready to leave. By the time we were about to go, he had finally left. I ran to the car with my hood up, paranoid that he would stop us. My parents thought it was weird that he was out there, but I never told them about the messages. They do not know why I was being so strange. I felt sick waiting for my dad to start the car. I did not know where he had gone or if he was still watching us. If he had found my phone number and our cabin number, what else could he find out? I have not really mentioned this story to anyone else. I cannot really handle it right now. I feel so violated. I sincerely hope I never meet that man ever again. I used to be a security officer at a community outreach center. I worked there for about 5 months before I left. Back in March of this year, I was at work, doing my job. The ground floor of the building was a daytime-only resource center for homeless people. The top floor was a government homeless outreach office. My security contract was with the government office, but I was responsible for the entire building. The government office was the mental health branch, so it was not uncommon for people with serious issues to be there. On this particular day, an individual came up to the office to pick up some housing paperwork. The man took the papers and walked over to a couch in the waiting area. After sitting down, he started digging through his backpack. He pulled out a large plastic bag full of some kind of white powder. This immediately got my attention. He grabbed a credit card from his wallet and used it to crush some of the powder on the small coffee table. He used the card to form the powder into 3 lines. Then he snorted all of it. What remained on the table, he just swept off with his hand. This was considered hostile and potentially illegal behavior. I walked over and started to ask the man to leave. He kept telling me he had to take his medicine. I informed him again that he needed to leave the premises. Then, without even looking at me, he said out loud that he had a certain type of handgun right in his bag that would make me shut up. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. I now had a potentially active shooter situation on my hands, and I was an unarmed officer. I calmly walked backwards to the receptionist's desk. I whispered to her to get the other client, who was in the office, call 911 and lock herself in the exam room. I told her not to open the door for anyone. She did this, and she also managed to inform the other caseworkers about the situation. They all locked and barricaded their office doors. They had cameras in the lobby, so all of this was recorded and later turned over to the police. After many other attempts to get the man to leave, I informed him that the police were on their way. He got up, got right in my face, and told me quietly that he was coming back for me one day. Then he stormed out. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They examined the footage, put out a bulletin for the man, and took samples of the powder he had left on the table. A few days later, I was informed that the man had been found. He had no guns and no drugs on him. The powder turned out to be some kind of crushed antipsychotic medication. He claimed he had just lost the bottle that it came in. Nothing terrible happened in the end, but still, as a 19-year-old unarmed security guard, this scared me very badly. For anyone who is curious, I still work for the same security company, but I now work the 3rd shift in a completely different location. To that man who threatened me, please just stay away from me. We have lived in our neighborhood for nearly 4 years. A few houses down and across the street from us lives a Vietnamese family. They are very nice people. Whenever we see each other, we always have small talk and we know each other by name. We moved in right before I gave birth to my oldest child, so they always asked about the baby and loved to see him. We have even had meals at each other's homes before. This past summer, they had an older family member come to visit. He was an uncle, maybe 55 to 60 years old. We noticed him right away because he would always go for long walks and he lingered a lot. One evening, the mother of the family, a woman named Lynn, introduced him to us. She said he had recently moved to the country and would be staying with them for a while before moving north to live with her sister. He was new to the United States and spoke very little English, just enough to get by. He seemed nice enough, but as soon as we walked back inside our house, I told my husband that he gave me a very weird vibe. I have never felt that way about any of the other family members from that home. I have been in their house and shared meals with them. They are very sweet and welcoming. My husband agreed that the uncle did seem a little off, but we just assumed it was due to cultural differences. About a month later, my mother-in-law and my own mother came to visit at the same time. They were in our driveway with our son. I had to run inside because I am pregnant and I suffer from terrible migraines. I came back out about 15 minutes later, and they were having a frustrating conversation with this man, the uncle. He was trying to get one of them to drive him to the grocery store. He wanted to use his food benefit card to buy their groceries for them, and then he wanted them to give him cash in return. They both told him they were not interested, but he just kept asking and would not leave. When I came outside, I called for my husband to come out. As soon as the uncle saw my husband, he walked away very quickly. Both of our mothers told us what had happened and how forceful he was being. The next few days, whenever I saw him walking, we would wave and say simple pleasantries. But every time I would wave, he would take it as an invitation to come over and try to start a conversation. I started to let him know that what he did with our mothers was very inappropriate and that being so forceful was unnecessary. He said he understood, but he would still linger. It would always happen when I was trying to strap my toddler into his car seat and I was rushing to get him to preschool. It would always take me about 10 minutes to get him to understand that I could not talk. He would slowly walk away but still linger in our driveway. It eventually got to the point where I would watch to see if he had already walked past our house on his morning walk before I would go outside. I really just hated the awkward conversation. He would always seem to round the corner just as I was getting into the car. I would wave and then jump in quickly and drive off. It just felt very off, like he was waiting for me. One of our other neighbors told me one night that she got a weird vibe from him as well. He always lingered. She said he did similar things with her when she was outside. She and her husband were now choosing to hang out in their backyard with their kids just to avoid him. I usually work from home, but one day I had to go into the office. I was alerted by my security camera on my phone. The man was standing at our kitchen window, just peering inside. I could hear our pit bull barking at him through the phone's microphone. When he saw our dog, he jumped back. I used the microphone feature to say, "Can I help you? What do you want?" He looked absolutely shocked and then scurried away. I called my husband and told him to play the video. We both thought it was extremely creepy. When we saw Lynn and her family walking that evening, we decided to bring it up to her. She spoke to her uncle, and he claimed that it never happened. We then showed her the video on my phone. He then said he must have gotten lost and thought it was his house. Lynn seemed very annoyed by him and the whole situation. His weird behavior calmed down a bit after that. I could see that his niece was really annoyed by his behavior. As they were walking away, I could see them having a very heated conversation. She later told me that he tends to be overly friendly and that he means no harm. She said she talked to him and he would leave us alone. I asked if he had some kind of mental issue, maybe dementia, since he was always getting lost. She told me no, that he had always acted like that. She said she could not wait until her sister was ready for him to be sent up north to her house. There were a few other neighbors who had also complained to her and to the homeowners association as well. About 2 months later, I dropped my son off at preschool. I got home and had to rush inside because I felt a migraine coming on. Usually, I leave my car door open in the driveway, but something told me to lock it as soon as I got out. I did. As I was rushing inside, I would also normally leave the front door unlocked if I was just running in for a moment. But again, my instincts told me to lock the bottom lock and the deadbolt. I was in the bathroom, which is right by the front door, feeling very sick. I then heard a rattling at the front door. Someone was turning the doorknob back and forth. Of course, my security camera chimed on my phone. I looked at it between heaves. What do you know? It was the old man, and he was trying to get into our home. I went over to the microphone and said, "You are at the wrong house." He responded with, "Let me in now. I want to tell you something." I kid you not. It was the clearest English sentence I had ever heard him speak. I started to feel better pretty quickly. I was now on high alert. I responded, "What do you want to tell me?" He looked right at the camera and said, "Let me in your house now." This is where I started to panic. He knew he was at the wrong house, but he was still trying to break in. I responded, "Please get off my property. I do not feel comfortable with you here, and I'm not letting you in my house." He then started rattling the door again, really hard this time. He tried to pull it open and then started knocking on the bathroom window. This is where I got pissed. I yelled, "Get the hell off my damn property right now. I am not going to let you in. If you do not get the hell out of here right now, I am calling the cops." He then stepped back from the door, gave the camera the middle finger, and scurried off. He disappeared, and I ran upstairs to look out a window. I saw him simply walking back to his house. I let our pit bull out of our bedroom, as he had been going crazy during the whole ordeal. I called my husband, and he told me to call the man's niece and tell her what happened. I called her, and she told me not to let him in, ever. She warned me that he had been very inappropriate and forceful with all the women in her family. She did not want me to get hurt, especially since I was pregnant. She came over about an hour later, and I showed her the video. She was absolutely fuming. She was very apologetic and begged me not to call the police. She promised me he would be gone within the next day. The next day, he flew out. His niece told him that he was no longer welcome in her home. He now lives up north, somewhere in Maryland, with his other niece. I honestly do not know what would have happened if I did not follow my instincts that day. I am just really glad I am okay. This story happened to me when I was in 4th grade. I was about 9 years old at the time. My regular babysitter was sick, so my mom asked one of our neighbors if she would watch my brother and I for a few hours. The neighbor had kids of her own and often watched other kids in the neighborhood. We were having so much fun at her house. When my mom came to pick us up, I asked if I could stay a little bit longer. We had just started watching the movie Ice Age, and I wanted to finish it. She said that was fine, but I was to walk straight home right after the movie ended. It was only half a block away, so not that far at all. As the movie finished, the neighbor told me I needed to get home quickly because it was getting dark outside. As I was walking home, this other neighbor, Mr. Clark, was just standing outside in his front yard. I had seen him around the neighborhood before. His wife was a very memorable-looking woman. They had a daughter who was maybe 4 years old at the time, so I had never played with her or known their family beyond just seeing them around. Mr. Clark started calling out to me. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was just going home to my parents. He asked if I wanted to come inside his house for a little bit. I told him no, that was okay. My mom told me to come straight home. He said, "Oh, come on. I'm sure she would not mind." I said no thanks. He kept insisting. He said he had a daughter who would absolutely love to play with me. He said we could even make snacks. At this point, I felt a huge red flag. I decided to abort the mission and started walking home really fast. Then he started following me. He was not walking quickly, just walking at a steady pace like a killer in a horror movie. It was creepy. Luckily, I made it home very quickly. Once he saw that I was approaching my house and my porch light was on, he completely backed off and turned around. I should mention that behind our houses was a very large wooded area with paths that led to a nearby lake. This man could have easily caught me and dragged me into those woods. I try not to think like that, but what other motive could he have had? I know this is not a typical horror story, but as a child, This was a very creepy experience to go through. About a year ago, my apartment complex decided they wanted to renovate my unit. This meant I had to move out at the end of my lease. I live in Austin, and the rent here is pretty ridiculous. I started worrying about finding something affordable in my neighborhood, which I really love. I posted in a local community group on Facebook to see if anyone in my neighborhood knew of any affordable rentals in the area. I immediately got a message from someone named Mark. He said that one of the duplexes in his complex was going to be up for rent very soon, and he knew the owner. He offered to get me in touch with the owner. I asked if he could send me some pictures of the unit. He asked if he could text me some pictures that his neighbor took, because the chat function on the website was really slow. I feel really stupid for doing this now, but I gave him my phone number. I kid you not, I received a phone call from an unknown number within seconds. I normally do not answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from a number that was not saved in my phone, so I answered it. I was completely bewildered when the person on the other end said, "Hi, it is Mark. How is your day going?" It really took me by surprise, and I did not know what to say. He started to just make small talk on the phone. He talked about how he was a musician and worked nights, and how tired he was. He talked about taking care of his daughter while his girlfriend worked during the day. I finally interrupted him and said, "So, about the duplex." He pretty much completely disregarded my question and then said, "I really do not think my girlfriend would appreciate me talking to you, but I do not have to tell her, right?" I said that I had to go and immediately hung up the phone. As soon as I did, he started texting me. It was really bizarre and quite alarming. I blocked his number. Moments later, he found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request. I am 32 years old, but this was really creepy to me. I even called my parents to tell them about it and just how unnerved it made me. The worst part about it is that in the community group, even if your exact address is not listed, your general neighborhood is. I was pretty certain that I did not have my address visible on my profile, but I checked. Sure enough, my full address and unit number were totally public. Unable to contact me in any other way, he started messaging me again on the community group page, asking if I wanted to go on a walk with him. You cannot really block or report people in that group, so I just decided to delete my account. One night, about a month or so later, I had a knock on my door at around 10 in the evening on a weeknight. I looked out my peephole, but could not get a good look. I saw that it was a man who had his head slightly down, wearing a baseball cap. Either way, I do not answer the door for anyone I am not expecting, especially not a random guy at 10 o'clock at night. Feeling a sense of panic, I decided to call my neighbor across the hall. She is an older woman, and we always look out for each other since we both live alone. I asked her if she could see if it looked like some kind of delivery guy at the wrong door. She opened her door to try and get a good look at the guy. That must have spooked him, because he literally ran away down the hall. I honestly have no idea if this was the guy from the neighborhood group or not, but my gut tells me that it was. This was a big wake-up call for me. I always thought that I practiced good online safety, but I did not even know that my address was visible on that group page. I will never be that casual or lazy about my privacy settings ever again. I am 28 years old now. When I was about 5 years old, my mom and I lived in this townhouse complex that was off a main road and kind of in a wooded area. We lived on one side of a connected unit, and the other side was occupied by a woman and her son. The son was studying to be a social worker. My mother had me pretty young, so she was about 25 years old at the time, and the guy was in his early 20s. He would often come over and talk to my mom. My mother said that he would ask a lot of questions about me. He asked my mother if it would be all right for him to take me for walks in the woods behind our complex. Of course, my mother always said no. My mother worked in the emergency room at the local hospital and was on call a lot. So, most weekends, I stayed at my grandma's house. One night, while I was at my grandma's, my mom was home alone sleeping. She woke up in the middle of the night. She said she does not remember if she heard something or just felt someone in the room, but she woke up. In the darkness, she could see a shape standing at the foot of her bed. She could just make out that it was a man wearing socks. She grabbed her bedside lamp and was about to hit the intruder with it when our neighbor then yelled her name and said his own name. He could not really explain why he was standing in her bedroom in the middle of the night, only wearing socks on his feet. He begged my mother not to tell his own mother about it. My mother, of course, called the police. She ended up going to court and making a victim impact statement against this guy. She was absolutely terrified that he would become a social worker and be around children. She says that she is pretty sure he was there for me that night. She was so happy that I was not there. We ended up moving pretty much immediately after that happened. She just could not stay another night in that house. I am just really glad that nothing happened to me or my mother. Who really knows what would have happened if he had succeeded in whatever he was trying to do that night. This happened about 4 years ago. I am 21 years old now, and I no longer live in that neighborhood. I saw the neighbor in question yesterday when I was visiting my parents, and that is when I remembered what had happened. To give some backstory, I live in a town in southern Europe that has struggled economically. Our neighborhood is one of the worst ones, but only for outsiders. We are actually pretty friendly towards each other. Even people who are fresh out of jail are typically friendly. We had a lot of people with mental health issues in our neighborhood, and Felice was one of them. My mother and I called him Happy because his name Felice literally means happy in Italian. We would always joke and say, "Oh, Happy, are you happy?" because he was usually always smiling. That is, unless someone angered him, which happened at least 3 times a year. I lived there for about 19 years, so I know how he is. Happy lived with his 2 brothers. One sells fruits at a market stall, and the other is a taxi driver. Happy did not work because he was mentally ill. I think he had some type of schizophrenia, but I'm not really sure. All I know is he did not really function right. You could not hold a conversation with him about sports or the news or really anything. His sentences just never made sense. I should also say that our country does not take mental illness very seriously. We have very few psychiatric wards in the entire country. There was just no way of treatment for him. People just referred to him as crazy. It is honestly very sad. My dad was actually friends with him and his brothers, though not anymore. My dad used to give him money from time to time so that he could buy himself smokes. My dad knew that his brother, the taxi driver, needed to support his own 2 kids in another city, and the fruit seller barely sold his goods. Happy used to help my dad carry groceries sometimes, and my dad would give him some change for it. So, since I was a kid, I only knew the Happy who was very helpful and friendly. I always smiled at him, and he would smile back at me. When I turned 15 years old, he had completely changed. He still had the smile on his face, but he would stand outside in different places in the street all day long, smoking. I used to wake up at about 7 in the morning to go to school, and I would see him outside wide awake, just smoking. He either did not sleep or just woke up way too early. He would also walk very long distances. We would see him in places that would take us a half an hour to get to by car. So imagine how long it took him to get there by foot. He seemed restless, but mostly he would just stand there and smoke from early in the morning to very late at night. His behavior toward me became pretty creepy. He would always stare at me and have a creepy kind of forced smile on his face. If I passed by him, he would always follow me with his eyes. It got to the point that he would walk backwards just to keep staring at me. I glanced back a couple of times to know that he did this every single time. He would walk backwards and then put his back up against a wall, like he was hiding or something. His whole demeanor just totally changed. His angry fits also became more frequent. He would shout cursing phrases that made no sense and walk angrily towards his house. Now, to what actually happened to me. As I said, he would always follow me with his eyes. I was 17 years old. On the day of the incident, I happened to be home alone. I did not go out with my family because I had to study for an exam. He probably knew I was alone because when my family left, I saw him through the window. He was standing in his usual spot, just staring at their car as they drove off. Lunchtime came, so I went to the local market to buy some things to cook. I spotted him standing next to his brother who sells fruit. I went to buy some vegetables and meat. The vegetable stall was pretty close to where Happy was, but the butcher was about a minute walk away. As I paid the butcher and put my purchase into my bag, I looked up. There was Happy, just staring at me. I did not really think much of it. I turned to the right and just kept walking towards my house, but he was right behind me. I still did not think much of it, because our houses are literally right next to each other. I passed his house, and I was waiting to hear his footsteps stop, but no, he was still right behind me. I looked, and his eyes were still on me with that really creepy smile. Still, I did not really care. I just thought he was going to his usual spot where he stands to light a cigarette. I had never really felt like I was in any danger in my neighborhood. I am not the type to get anxious easily, especially not by Happy. I never felt he was the dangerous type, even during his rage fits. That is why I had no red flags. I entered the main door from the street into our building. I walked into the wide rectangular hall. There was one door on this floor where an old man lived. I passed his door and turned right to climb the stone stairs to get to my apartment on the second floor. I heard someone enter the main door and come into the hall behind me. Again, I just thought it was one of the neighbors from the third floor. The footsteps were really quick though. I thought one of them was in a hurry, so I turned to look at the bottom of the stairs to see who it was and make some room so they could climb past me. To my shock, it was none other than Happy. He was at the bottom of the stairs. I stopped dead in my tracks. That is when my heart just started pounding really fast. I said, "Happy, what are you doing here?" With no response, he started bolting right towards me, taking 2 steps at a time. I started climbing faster too, but he caught my foot and I slipped. My right arm and knee were in so much pain from the fall. He started dragging me by my ankle down the stairs. It messed up my back as well, but with all the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I started kicking to release my ankle from his 2 hands. I started screaming for him to get off of me. I also screamed for help, hoping one of the neighbors would hear me. With my free leg, I started kicking his forearm so that he would let go. I kept kicking and shaking my other leg free as well. With a bit of luck, I finally got free. I could not turn around though. I started climbing the stairs again, afraid that he would follow me to the house. God only knows what he would do if he got inside. I wanted to kick him and make him lose his balance and fall, just to give me enough time to get inside my house. I kicked and kicked, but with no luck. I was still screaming. It felt like forever, but it was probably only about 5 seconds. Then I heard the door of the old man downstairs begin to open. Happy heard it too, so he fled out of the building. The old man saw him as he ran past, and he shouted at him, but Happy did not listen. The old man was calling my name and asking if I was okay, but I could not respond. He popped his head up from the bottom of the stairs, still calling my name, but all I could do was cry. My elbow was bleeding. He started calling for my mom. I told him that nobody was home. He asked me to come down to his apartment so he could help take care of my bleeding. I told him it was okay, and then I would do it myself. He refused and kept calling for me to come down. Eventually, I just ignored him and hardly climbed the rest of the stairs and got inside my apartment. After about an hour, I got myself cleaned up and calmed down a bit. I cautiously went to the old man's apartment. I knocked and he opened the door. I asked him not to tell anything to my parents. If my dad knew, he would probably literally kill the guy. I told him that Happy was just crazy, and my dad should not go to jail for someone who was crazy and probably was not in his right mind. I eventually talked him into believing that it was not that serious. He'd promised he would not say anything to my family, and that was that. For the next 2 years, Happy changed again completely. This time, however, he would not even look me in the eyes. If I was walking and he was walking towards me, he would literally turn around and not pass near me. For the first couple of months, I was really afraid that he would be waiting around a corner or something. But it turns out, he just does not want to be seen by me. Even after I moved out, whenever I visit to this day, 4 years later, he still does not want to be seen by me. So, Happy, I hope you stay that way and do not hurt any other girls from the neighborhood. But what I really hope for the most is mental illness awareness in my country. I really hope that people start getting treatment and the right care. People like Happy really need it. I used to live in a garden apartment complex on the first floor. I had one person who lived right next door, a man named Kevin, and two more neighbors that were adjacent to my unit. I met my next door neighbor when he knocked on my door one evening as the sun was setting. He was a plump man with brown hair and a bowl cut, glasses, and a button-down shirt. He told me that he had been knocking on doors and asking if someone could babysit his cat for the weekend. He said he was allegedly being called away for a last-minute work trip. I agreed to watch his cat. Thinking only of possible problems that might arise with the animal, I asked for his phone number. I said it was just in case. That was a major mistake on my part, but I did not realize it at the time. I was really just trying to be a good neighbor. We had a short conversation about my love for board games and my weekly gaming night. It seemed like we had a lot of mutual interests. I was just being friendly, nothing more. I had my wedding ring on. I made sure to brush my hand across my face to make sure that he could see it. My husband was deployed at the time. I did not really think anything of it. Kevin came back on Monday morning, and I gave him his key back. I had not asked for any money, but he offered to pay me back in another way. Apparently, his office was having a trivia night event, and he was allowed to bring a friend. I agreed to go because, why not? He seemed like a really cool person that could potentially become a new friend for me. When the day came, I was not feeling very well. I was cuddling on the couch, wrapped up in blankets with my sweet little cat named Pip. I was really sick and had not been able to make it into work that day. So, I sent Kevin a text letting him know that I would not be able to make it to the event and to not worry about paying me back. Kevin's response was just, okay. I did not respond after that. I fell asleep. I started getting text messages from him over the next several weeks. Context did not really add up until the very end. He had texted me asking why I had not invited him to my weekly board game night. How did he know that I was currently having one? My only explanation was that he must have heard me talking about it out in the hallway as I was leaving with my friend. Things started to get a little strange from here on out. Just beyond his door was a really nice-sized patch of grass where I would take my dog out to use the bathroom. My dog, who was very mild-mannered, suddenly started to turn towards Kevin's window, where the blinds were always closed all the way. He started barking absolutely hysterically. I was really embarrassed about it. I would pull him and command him to be quiet, but to no avail. Every day that I went to that patch of grass in the afternoon, he would consistently bark at that window like a maniac. I eventually started taking him somewhere else to see if it would change, and it did. I went back to that patch of grass after about a week. I found out that the blinds were pulled all the way to the top and the window was open. Kevin had his torso leaned all the way out, stretching his arms to the sky. My first initial thought was just, who does that? I said an awkward hello and then hurried my dog along and back into our apartment. Someone began to knock on my door every other day. I would become deadly quiet and tiptoe to the door to see that it was none other than Kevin. He was just standing there, peering intently into the peephole. I did not open the door. It happened about 3 more times, and every time the house became quiet. A little bit of time went by, and I then received a text message from Kevin offering to take me out to dinner. I was absolutely perplexed. I stared at the message and did not really know what to say back. Not even 3 minutes went by, and he sent another message. It said, "You know, I am just trying to be friendly after you ditched me last time. Sorry for being friendly. I should have taken a picture of my face at that time, because the shock must have been so great that my cat sat up just to stare at me. Let me be very clear. I am a busy woman. I have a lot going on in my life. I did not usually text people back immediately. I was pretty freaked out by that point. I decided to call my mom and tell her what had happened. I felt really unsafe in my own home. I did not know what to do. What if this dude decided to try and break into my apartment and attack me, all because I supposedly ditched him when I felt too sick to go to a trivia night? My mom said to let him know very firmly that my husband would not appreciate me having dinner with another man and that his behavior was really inappropriate. For some reason, it took me mentioning my husband for Kevin to back off. Not me ignoring him or avoiding him or practically running to my car whenever I heard his door open. Even after that, my dog would still turn to the window and growl. I eventually moved out of that apartment and never heard from Kevin ever again. Let's keep it that way. I live in a small loft-style apartment. I like my place, even though it has some details that always made me a little nervous. The wall that faces the street is basically just a giant window. I also live on the second floor, so my window is very close to the street below. There is a fire escape that looks very easily climbable and gives direct access to my window. Even though that made me a little uncomfortable, nothing ever really happened, and it stopped bothering me a couple of months after I moved in. That is, until last week. Last Monday, I woke up at around 2 in the morning to go get some water to drink. Since my kitchen is right next to my front door, I could hear something coming from the corridor as I filled up a cup of water. It was not coming from another apartment or from the street. The noise had that very specific reverberation that you only hear in an empty corridor. I approached the door and could make out that the sound was actually some kind of distorted electronic melody playing on a loop. At first, I thought maybe it was just some drunk guy messing around with his phone before getting to his apartment. But after laying in bed again, I could still faintly hear the same melody coming from the corridor. It kept playing and playing until I fell asleep about an hour later. 7 in the morning rolled around, and I was woken up by someone ringing my doorbell. It was a police officer. A bunch of them, actually. The landlord and some of my neighbors were also there in the hallway. Even with the place being really crowded, it was hard to miss the large, dark stain on the carpet that went from the corridor window to the far end of the wall. It looked like something heavy had been dragged. The cops said that someone was leaving for work early in the morning when they came across the stain and immediately called the police. He questioned me and the other neighbors. The place was scrubbed clean, and we all went on with our lives. I could not stop thinking about it. Every single day, when I come home, I walk over the spot where the stain was. I always wonder what the heck happened in the corridor that night. I was a little bit uncomfortable living here before, but now I am definitely really spooked out. I wonder if I will ever figure out what happened. When I was in college, I lived in apartments that were not on campus, but were still considered student housing. They were managed by a private company. I saw this guy around the complex that I thought was pretty cute. His name was Leo. He knocked on my door one day. He said he was part of the campus security patrol that monitored our complex, and he was there to change our smoke detector batteries. I was making dinner for my roommate and myself at the time. He commented that it smelled really good, so I invited him to stay for dinner. Everything went pretty normal. We watched a movie afterwards. It was totally innocent. At about midnight or so, I kept telling him that I was really tired. I was trying to hint for him to leave. My roommate had already gone to bed, so it was just him and me. After I told him to leave, because I was going to bed, he kept trying to talk me out of it. He said I should stay up longer. He just kept taking forever to leave, trying to drag it out. When he was finally putting on his shoes, he suddenly started crying out in pain. He said he had a severe cramp in both of his calves. He told me that he could not walk upstairs to his own apartment, and he did not know what to do. I really wanted to go knock on his door to have his roommate come and get him, but I am in a wheelchair. I could not go upstairs. We had an extra bedroom in our apartment that only had a bed in it and nothing else. He continued asking if he could sleep in that room. I kept telling him no. We argued for about 10 minutes about allowing him to sleep in the extra bedroom. I was so freaking exhausted. I just went ahead and decided to let him. I locked my roommate's door and my own door from the inside so that he at least could not come into our rooms. When I woke up the next morning, luckily he was gone and nothing was stolen. I honestly should have reported it to the apartment complex, but I was not really thinking clearly. A couple of days later, I heard someone knock on my bedroom window in the middle of the night. I totally flipped out about it. It ended up being Leo, but obviously I did not let him in. Then, the next night, my roommate and I were in the living room watching television. He came and knocked on our front door. Ashley, my roommate, answered it. He asked for me, and she said that I was already asleep. His response was, "No, I know she is not asleep. I look inside your window, so I know she is awake." Yes, Leo was definitely a creep. I moved to Cleveland for a graphic design program when I was 19 years old. My family lived in a very quiet, rural part of the state, so the city was a huge change for me. My new roommate, a girl named Chloe, was already living there and found an apartment for us before I arrived. She said it was in a great location, close to the Art Institute, and that the landlord had just finished renovating it. The price was very low for the area, which should have been my first warning. When my dad and I pulled up to the building in September, I saw it was an old converted textile mill. It looked impressive from a distance, like a piece of history, but up close, it was crumbling. The lobby was a complete disaster zone. There were old washing machines and dryers lining the hallway, and the walls were covered in sloppy patches of plaster. Large sections of the floor were just bare concrete. Our apartment itself, however, was actually quite nice. It had new floors, fresh paint, and huge windows that let in a lot of light. Since it was my first place away from my parents, I was just happy to have my own space. The building was mostly full of other students and a few artists. The landlord, a quiet old man, lived on the top floor, so it all felt reasonably secure. Chloe had the buzzer system for the main door connected to her cell phone. When someone rang for our apartment, her phone would ring, and she could talk to them and unlock the door remotely. About a week into the semester, I was home alone one afternoon. Chloe was at her job as a long-haul truck driver, so I knew she would be on the road and unreachable for a few days. I got a text from her that had clearly been sent before she lost service. She said someone had just buzzed the apartment. When she answered, a strange man's voice was on the other end, yelling something she could not understand. She told me she did not let him in. I felt a little nervous, but I figured it was just a random city occurrence. Maybe 10 minutes later, I heard someone banging on our apartment door. It was not a normal knock. It was a heavy, persistent pounding. They did not say a word, just kept hitting the door. I was terrified. I went into my bedroom, locked the door, and sat on my bed with my phone in my hand, not sure who to even call. The banging continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 15 minutes. Eventually, it stopped. I waited a long time before I crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I felt a huge wave of relief, thinking I had avoided some dangerous person. Nothing else strange happened for a couple of weeks. Then one morning, I woke up feeling very sick. I emailed my professors and told Chloe I was staying home from class. She left for another one of her long trips very early that morning. This time, there was no warning text. I was in bed when I heard someone at our door again. This time, it was a loud, frantic knocking. I was too sick and scared to get up. We were not expecting any packages, and all our friends knew to text first. Besides, I wondered how anyone could have even gotten into the building without buzzing Chloe's phone. I buried my head under the covers, just hoping they would leave. After a few minutes, the knocking stopped. I started to relax, thinking it was over. Then I heard a sound that made my entire body go cold. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock. The front door of my apartment creaked open. Someone stepped inside. I was paralyzed with fear. I always sleep with my bedroom door closed, so they could not see me from the living room. I knew it was not Chloe. Her truck was probably halfway to Texas by then, with no phone service in sight. Our landlord was required to give us 24 hours notice before entering, and he always did. I grabbed my phone and started frantically texting Chloe, knowing she would not get the messages for hours. I was crying silently in my bed, shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I could hear the person walking around our small living room. They picked something up off the coffee table, then set it down. They shuffled around the kitchen area. It was so quiet and deliberate. It was the most frightening few minutes of my life. Then, Just as suddenly as they had entered, they left. I heard the front door close gently. I waited until I was sure they were gone before I ran to the front door. I bolted every lock we had and slid the security chain into place. I later found that a small framed photo of my family had been turned to face the wall. To this day, we have no idea who it was. It could have been the same person who was banging on the door before, or maybe a former tenant who kept a key. We broke our lease and moved out a few months later to a much more secure building in a quiet suburb. I still get a sick feeling in my stomach whenever I have to drive past that old mill. I attended college in Chicago for 4 years, and this happened during my final semester. I lived in a student housing complex in a neighborhood that had a reputation for being rough. There were constant problems with men catcalling students, and it was not the first time I had been followed. It was just the worst time. Whenever I told my classmates about a creepy encounter, they would ask where I lived. As soon as I told them, they would nod with understanding. I should also mention that I have a pretty severe anxiety disorder. On this particular day, I had a very strong feeling that something bad was going to happen. I almost did not go to my classes, but if I stayed home every time my anxiety gave me a bad feeling, I would never leave my apartment. So I pushed the feeling down and got ready to go. Because of the problems in the area, I always tried to dress in a way that would not attract attention. My usual style was a bit artsy, with colorful scarves and unique jewelry. I loved that style, but it made me stand out. On this day, I wore baggy jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt, and no makeup at all. I just wanted to be ignored. It did not work. It is also important to note that a notice had been posted in the lobby of our building a week earlier. It was a warning from campus security. A man had recently tried to assault a few female students from our building and another one nearby. The flyer included a vague description of the man, mentioning he was tall and often wore a dark hooded sweatshirt. I had not been walking for 5 minutes when I realized a man was following me. At first, I was not too alarmed. It was common for people to approach you in that neighborhood, usually asking for money or trying to sell something. I heard him call out, but I kept my head down and walked faster. Ignoring people usually worked. This time, it did not. He followed me across the street, his footsteps matching mine. He became more frustrated as I ignored him. His calls became more insistent. My heart was pounding. I am a big fan of true crime podcasts, and I know you are not supposed to fall into the politeness trap. I did not want to engage with him at all. Up ahead, I saw a small cluttered bookstore that I knew had security cameras. I walked straight inside, hoping he would not follow me into a public place with a security guard at the door. He followed me right inside. I went down the first aisle and pulled out my phone. I texted my dad to call me immediately. My dad lived on the other side of the country, so he could not do much, but I thought maybe seeing me on the phone would scare the man off. Worst case, my dad could be a witness to whatever happened. He knew I had problems with strange men in my neighborhood, so he called me back right away. We had a code phrase I could use if I was in trouble, but I was too panicked to be subtle. The man was now standing a few feet away, pretending to look at books, but mostly just staring at me. He had his hood pulled up low over his face, and he wore a very thick, dark pair of sunglasses. He looked a lot like the man from the security flyer. When he saw I was on the phone, he disappeared from the aisle. I stayed where I was, shaking and pretending to read the back of a novel. My dad was trying to calm me down and give me advice at the same time. A minute later, the man reappeared, this time holding a copy of some expensive art book. He walked up to me and asked if he could borrow $50 for the book. I gave him a hard look and said no as firmly as I could. I tried to make my 5'3" frame seem intimidating. He acted hurt and offended, then put the book back on the shelf and walked toward the exit. I did not believe he was really gone. I stayed in the aisle, telling my dad what happened, before slowly making my way through the store, checking every corner for him. I was in the last aisle when he showed up again, slowly walking toward me. There was only one other person in the aisle, a bookstore employee stocking shelves. I was trying to get the courage to go to the employee for help when the man tried to talk to me again. I spun around and snapped at him, asking him what he wanted from me. I wanted to make it clear I was not an easy target. He seemed surprised and mumbled something about my style that I could not understand over the sound of my own heartbeat. Then he put on his offended act again and stormed away. I walked around the store a few more times to be sure he was gone before I finally paid for my book. I peeked out the front door and saw him lingering on the street corner. I had to wait until he was distracted by something before I ran out and headed for the train station. I was a nervous wreck, but I was too scared to go back to my apartment. The entrance to my building was down a quiet side street that was more like an alley. It was much less safe than the busy route to the train. I decided to just go to campus and try to calm down with my friends. My dad stayed on the phone with me until I was safely on the train. I thought that was the end of it. The next week, my class was canceled, so I stayed home. But the week after that, on the same day, at the same time, I left my apartment to go to class. I had barely walked 10 feet from my building's entrance when someone fell into step beside me. I thought it was another student until I heard his voice. He asked if I remembered him. I looked over and felt a wave of dread. It was the same man. I told him to go away, but this time he was not pretending to be polite. He seemed amused. He told me he was just walking this way too. I stopped walking and gestured for him to go ahead of me. If he was telling the truth, he would just keep walking. He did not. He stopped and smiled at me. It was a sinister, knowing smile. He asked why I would not talk to him. I told him to leave me alone, but my voice was shaking. I started walking again. I knew that around the next corner was a music venue that always had security guards outside. He kept trying to talk to me, asking if I had a boyfriend. I was tempted to say yes, but I knew it would just lead to more invasive questions. I told him to get lost, but he just kept asking questions. As we rounded the corner, I saw one of the venue's security officers. I immediately picked up my pace and walked directly toward him. The creeper quickly said he would leave me alone then, and he disappeared. I ran the rest of the way to the train station. After my family and friends begged me to, I reported the incidents to the student housing staff. They put me in touch with the local police. The police were not helpful at all. I sent them a full written account of what happened, and they never even got back to me. For the rest of the semester, my dad or one of my uncles would stay on the phone with me every time I had to walk to and from the train station. A few months after I graduated and moved back home, I got a text from my best friend. It was a link to an article on a local news blog. The text with it read, "Is this the guy who was following you?" The article was about a man who had been in court for assaulting students in my old neighborhood. There was a photo of him. It was him. It was also the man from the security flyer. In the photo, he was not wearing the sunglasses, which made me realize they were a disguise. The article said he was already banned from being near student housing at the time he was harassing me. It explained how he followed other girls from the exact same spot where he first followed me, but they did what I did not. They were polite. When he asked them questions, they answered. He would then ask where they were going, and when they told him, he would say, "No, you are coming with me," and then he would grab them. The worst part of it all was that he received no jail time. He was given a curfew. In the same article, the police officer who never bothered to call me back congratulated himself and his team on how well they handled the case. I am still dealing with the anxiety from those encounters. I will never live in that city again. There is a small, strange coastal town in Washington state called Port Townsend. It is a very artistic, hippie kind of place. On the outskirts of town sits a massive abandoned sanatorium that was once used for tuberculosis patients. The grounds are huge and deserted, with decaying buildings and a rusted-out water tower. That is not the creepy part of the story, though. It is just some background for how strange this town can be. When the sanatorium finally closed down for good, many of the long-term residents and caretakers had nowhere to go. Some of them ended up homeless, but many of them found their way to the Seaview Inn. The Seaview was the cheapest place to live in town. It was an old turn-of-the-century hotel right on the water that had fallen into deep disrepair. It rented rooms by the month and was technically a kind of unofficial halfway house. It had a dark history of its own. It had been shut down years ago after a man died on the front steps, but it eventually reopened to the public. At this point in my life, I was a broke art student. The place gave me weird vibes, but I was desperate for cheap rent. I thought living there would be an interesting experience. I was not wrong. First, the building's architecture was a nightmare. It looked like it was designed by someone having a fever dream. There were long, narrow hallways that would suddenly get so tight you had to turn sideways to get through. There were doors that were painted over, and other doors that opened onto solid brick walls. Tiny, doll-sized doors were set into the baseboards, but they never opened. The walls were decorated with unsettling abstract paintings and old, faded pictures of sad-looking children. My own room was small and had a large, mysterious black circle painted on the ceiling directly above my bed. A friend of mine who lived at the end of the hall had a window that looked out onto nothing but a solid brick wall. The place was bizarre, but the neighbors were even stranger. People who seemed to be suffering from schizophrenia and various addictions wandered the halls at all hours. You would just be walking to the shared bathroom when a door would suddenly fly open. A frail-looking woman would peek out and tell you that the other tenants were listening to her thoughts through the walls and that she was sleeping with a hammer under her pillow for protection. Another time, a friend who lived on my floor opened her door to find an entire desk lamp taken apart, piece by piece, with all the components laid out in a perfect, neat line on her doormat. A few incidents really stand out in my memory. Once, I went to the shared kitchen to heat up some soup. One of the female residents was already in there, sitting at the small table. She was a large, intimidating woman who had a habit of ramming her shoulder into people she passed in the hallways. She was just sitting there, humming a strange, tuneless song to herself and meticulously arranging pieces of rotting fruit into patterns on the tabletop. She watched me with a dead-eyed, sideways glance the entire time I was in there. I tried to ignore her, but the humming was getting louder. I finally asked if everything was all right. She stopped humming and stared at me. She started muttering to herself, just loud enough for me to hear. She said that I was stealing her light, that I was a shadow person. I was definitely unnerved. I grabbed my bowl of soup and a spoon and started to leave. As soon as she saw the spoon in my hand, she started screaming. She yelled that I had a weapon, that I was going to use it to scoop out her eyes and steal her soul. Her screams were hysterical. I did not stick around. I ran back to my room and locked the door. I could still hear her screaming down the hall, followed by a high-pitched, cackling laugh that echoed through the building. Another time, a man who was clearly high on some kind of drug cornered me at the bottom of the main staircase. I had to pass him to get to my room. He mumbled something at me as I walked by, then reached out and grabbed my arm. He tried to pull me toward him, saying something about showing me the stars. I yanked my arm away so hard that he lost his balance and fell over. As I ran up the stairs, I could hear him getting back up, calling my name in a slurred, drugged-out voice. I hid in my room until I was sure he was gone. A week later, he saw me in the lobby and asked me which room I lived in, as if he had forgotten the whole incident. That was a brief summary of the strangest place I have ever lived. It was a creepy and unforgettable experience. A few months ago, my younger sister, Eliza, started talking to a boy online named Leo. They had a lot in common, including a love for poetry and obscure films. They were only about a year apart in age. At first, none of us thought anything of it. It is normal for teenagers to have online friends. Eliza is pretty introverted, so it was nice to see her connecting with someone. From what I could tell, Leo was very supportive of her. He seemed to be there for her emotionally, and she became attached to him very quickly. He also introduced her to a few of his friends from what he called his online literary circle. They all seemed like typical artistic teenagers. Leo seemed like a genuine, caring person. He even messaged me a couple of times when he was worried that Eliza was upset about something. I was happy she had found a friend like him. One day, Eliza asked my mom if she could meet up with Leo. He lived in another state but had arranged to stay with his cousin for a weekend, so it seemed like the perfect chance for them to meet. They arranged to meet at a large comic book convention in the city where his cousin lived. My mom and I went with her. When the day came, he never showed up. He sent a message saying he had lost his wallet and could not afford the ticket to get into the convention. We figured his cousin was probably just worried about him meeting someone from the internet. I will admit, I had a bad feeling about the whole thing while we were waiting for him, but I just ignored it. Eliza was very upset that he was a no-show. Leo sent me a long message apologizing for everything. He explained that his cousin could be very overprotective. At the time, I believed him. A couple of months went by, and they continued to chat online like normal. At some point, Leo suggested that my mom and Eliza could just fly to his state to visit him. He seemed really excited about the idea, so they bought the plane tickets. One day, completely out of the blue, Eliza burst into my room. She was terrified. She told me to block Leo and his friends on all my accounts immediately. When I asked her why, she explained that Leo was a fake identity. The person running the account was someone who had bullied and threatened her online a year earlier using a different name. Every single one of the pictures he had posted was stolen from the Instagram account of a minor European model. She found all this out when one of Leo's supposed friends accidentally sent her a private message that was clearly meant for someone else. The message revealed the entire deception. Whoever this person was, after being confronted by Eliza, admitted to creating the persona to keep tabs on her. They had been talking for months, and she had told him so many personal things about her life. My mom canceled the flights immediately. We were all completely spooked. We could not go to the police because Eliza, in her panic, had deleted all the messages from the accounts. We did manage to contact the model whose pictures were stolen. We told him what had happened, and he reported the account. It was taken down a few days later. So to whoever Leo really is, let's hope we never cross paths. Stay away from my sister. This story happened about 5 years ago. I got home from my job one evening and logged into my Instagram account. I had a message request from someone I did not know. The message was long, and the person who sent it was clearly distressed. It said something like, "I know you have no idea who I am, but someone has been using your identity to catfish me for the last 2 years, and I just found out." The center of the message was a man named Mark. According to him, he had met the imposter online over 2 years ago. They had been in a very serious and intimate long-distance relationship for most of that time. The imposter had created a fake Instagram profile using my name and, over time, had reposted almost all of my photos. They even stole a lot of the digital art I had posted online and took credit for it. To make the profile seem more legitimate, the imposter had created fake accounts for many of my close friends and family members. These fake accounts would comment on the photos, saying things like, "You look so beautiful," or "I had so much fun with you today." It was an incredibly elaborate deception. The strangest part was that the imposter, who was a woman, had to explain her voice whenever she spoke to Mark on the phone. She told him that she had a chronic vocal cord injury from a childhood illness, which was why her voice sounded the way it did. Mark was justifiably angry and very creeped out. He wanted to find the person who had deceived him. He started asking me a lot of questions about my life. Some of them were things anyone could find on my public profile, but then he asked me about my pet. He asked if I owned a Sphinx cat with a distinct crescent moon-shaped marking on its back. This struck me as very odd. I love cats, but I have never owned a hairless one. Then he asked if I had a younger brother who attended a specific university out of state. I do not have a brother, and I had never posted anything about my family that would suggest I did. Mark already had a feeling that the imposter was someone who knew me in real life, and this confirmed it for me. Apparently, after 2 years, Mark had finally become suspicious that the imposter would never video chat with him. He gave her an ultimatum: either show your face on a video call, or the relationship was over. That is when the imposter admitted to being a catfish. She told him she had been using the identity of someone she knew from her art classes in college, and then she hung up on him. Mark gave me the username of the fake profile. It was still active. It was bizarre to scroll through it. The imposter had posted more often than I did. It genuinely looked like she was living a complete double life online as me. There were fake check-ins at restaurants I had never been to, and tagged photos with other fake profiles of people I did not know. The amount of time and effort this person had spent creating this fabricated world was shocking. While I was looking through this fake life, Mark was looking through my real profile. He sent me another message. He asked if I had taken a particular photograph. It was a picture of a Sphinx cat, the one with the moon-shaped marking. I told him I had not. We both tried to reverse image search on the photo, but found nothing. Then, Mark had a brilliant idea. He searched for local pet enthusiast groups online and started looking through their photo galleries. In a group for owners of exotic pets, he found her. He found the real owner of the cat, a girl named Jenna, and she had posted the exact same photo. I could not believe it. I was actually social media friends with the real imposter. We had taken a few art classes together in college. We both went to her profile and started snooping. It was definitely her. I thought about messaging her for a long time, but I decided it would not lead to anything good. At the time, I just wanted to distance myself from the whole situation. Mark seemed to feel the same way. He was just glad to have some closure. It was a very strange experience. I felt violated and freaked out, but there was also a tiny, strange part of me that was flattered. The weirdest part is that I am a really approachable person. I would have gladly been friends with Jenna if she had just talked to me in class. I have always wondered if she did it because she had some kind of obsession with me, or if she just thought my life looked like a suitable template for her own. I recently found out from a mutual acquaintance that Jenna suffers from severe agoraphobia. She has not left her house in years. That sort of confirmed my suspicion that her motive was to live a social life that she could not have in reality. It makes me sad to think about it. It just shows that no matter how much you might wish you were someone else, that person probably has their own demons they wish they could escape from too.